right, looks like we are live. Welcome everyone. I am so glad to have you here tonight. Tonight we are going to be talking about the power of imagination, how you can use that to your advantage, how you can use it to help with feelings of depression, anxiety, dark thoughts, any of that kind of stuff. For those of you that it's your first time joining my channel, my name is Tina. I am a happiness coach and I help people deal with feelings of depression and emotion, and I do this by sharing my own personal experience, strength and hope of exactly what I do to help move through those situations so that you can get yourself to a happier place. Now, this doesn't mean that you're always walking around smiling and everything's sunshine and rainbows. This is a lot of times when you are doing this deeper inner work, it is heavy emotional work, especially if you've had a childhood like mine, where if you do an ACEs test, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences, I get a 10 out of 10, which is a lot of fun. Not something that you want to get perfect on. So, imagination was something that was really powerful for me as a kid, and I was always coming up with things. And I'm going to start with actually a funny story. So, and my brother always used to love to tease me about this kind of stuff. So when we would go to visit my grandparents in their house, and they had like an older house, and it had like a cellar in it. And back when I was a kid, of course, she waits. She waits until I start the live. So when I was a kid, I had seen this scary movie, and there were some kids that were killed in like a cellar, right? And it was, I think the actual movie might have been called Don't Go Down in the Cellar. I think that was something. So my brother and I always used to go to the movies every weekend as kids. So I was always having, wild imagination. So when we would go to visit my grandparents, my brother liked to freak me out every time I went by the cellar door. And you had to actually go past the cellar door to get to the bathroom. And there was only one bathroom in the house. And so if it was like nighttime, and I would stand in the kitchen trying to work up the courage, because I had all these imaginings that came from going to this movie and seeing that movie. And so I was scared, and I would like muster up the courage within me, and then I'd run as fast as I can, and I'd slam the bathroom door quickly, and I would go use the washroom, and then when it was time to come out, it was the same process, except I had to get the courage to run past it. And I had all of these imaginings of these scary monsters that would be coming out or trying to grab me coming from the cellar. And so I was somebody that always had this really vivid imagination, and to the point where it's not just the images that you see in your mind, it was a physical sensation. So I'm really good at being able to visualize things and then also attach an emotion to it, which is actually manifestation. And so being able to tie that stuff in is a really powerful skill. Now, if you don't know the value of this power or the problems that it can have when you visualize those kind of things, thankfully, manifestation of negative shit is not as powerful as the positive stuff, because even though it is powerful and it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, trust me, there have been way more negative thoughts over the years than there have been positive. So it's not an instantaneous thing, right? So it's something that is more gradual, and the universe does have spot checks in place to allow for course correction. Because imagine if what we imagined was instantaneous. Oh my God, that would correct a lot of our thoughts. Now, that being said, if you err on that side of caution of always focusing on the positive and look at it as more planting seeds and being able to tap into that side of you. But being able to visualize something and then attaching an emotion to it is a powerful way of manifestation and being able to imagine that. Now, when we do this in a positive way for ourselves, it can be a really strong tool for us to envision a different way of being, a different life. Now, in order for us to do that, we have to know what's possible, or to be able to create what's possible and try to get yourself to a much more immersive experience. And we do this by, if you are imagining getting a house, if you are thinking of, how is it going to look? What is the layout going to look like? Is it going to be a 2-story? Is it going to be a raised bungalow? Is it going to have 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms? What is it going to have? What kind of finishings are in there? What does the backyard look like? Any of those kind of things. And being able to, the more you can imagine that in greater detail, and if you do that frequently enough, you'll be able to start seeing opportunities that will be able to move you in alignment with what it is you're envisioning. And I used to do this with jobs that I had, and it was also attaching a certain emotion to it of exactly how I was going to feel when I received that. And that is something that imagination, being able to tap into that and use that to your advantage, right? And the more that you do that on a frequent basis of being able to tap into those feelings, it can be really, really powerful. Here's one of the downsides though. When we do this often, and we do it without realizing it most of the time, we do this in any of our relationships, when especially a romantic relationship, you when you first get together, you have all of these dreams of what you're going to do together. Maybe you get married and you have these dreams and these visions of how you see it unfolding as you go through the relationship. And if that relationship ends or gets taken apart, one of the challenges and where depression can come from is grieving the loss of the dreams, the things that you imagine doing together, and what you imagine that to be looking like. And that can be something that's really, really painful. So one of the consequences of envisioning these dreams of the things that it is that you want, it can really cause a lot of pain when that doesn't come to fruition. And when you grow up in a childhood like mine, daring to dream was something that can be extremely painful because there were so many times that you can be let down. And I know throughout my childhood, there was one thing that I had asked for Christmas. Every Christmas, I had come up with, I wanted a piano. And taking piano lessons was something that I so wanted to do. It was something really, really important for me. And I used to go to the newspaper and I would cut out ads for pianos. I tried coming up with budgets and different things. I would actually even make the call and would try to negotiate and try to get the cost down. And then when I presented that to my parents, I was always told, that's too much, we can't afford it, we have no room for it. There was always some sort of reason of why that could not happen. And one of the things, it's like every year I would get my hopes up. I would, offer solutions on how to be able to get this piano. And it just wasn't something that could happen. Now, had at the time, maybe electric pianos had been a thing, that might have been something they would have went for because it could have been quiet. I could have put headphones in. But a real one, it just wasn't going to happen. So one of the things that can happen when you have those kind of experiences, it ends up conditioning you to develop a certain set of beliefs that do not serve you as you get older. Now, one of the things that I did going through the healing process was being able to, one of the first things I bought in my 20s was a piano. And I had gone all out for it because I had been talking about it with some of my recovery friends, and they're like, if it was that important to you, why don't you actually take the action and get it for yourself, get it for that inner child that really wanted it. And so I went and did that. I took a few lessons and stuff like that, but then I wasn't really good, and I hadn't learned the concept of that it's okay to fail, right? It's okay to make mistakes, and that you're supposed to not know things in the beginning. And for me, one of the things that had been challenging for me is there was still a very much underlying sense of shame if I didn't instantly pick things up right away. There were consequences for that growing up, and the whole, you're older, you should know better, you have to take care of your brother, all of these kind of things. And so not being able to get it on the first try is something that brought up a lot of shame for me. And it's something that I still work through today, because I get very frustrated with myself if I don't pick things up on the first try. I hadn't yet learned the concept that that you're supposed to fail. You're supposed to not get it right the first time. You're supposed to make mistakes. And I didn't realize that I had this unconscious belief that that was unacceptable. Now, obviously, that wasn't something that I had just taught myself. That was a survival skill of what I needed to develop in order to be effective. And I would try to guess and anticipate what other people wanted. So I was very externally focused, very focused on watching other people, looking for cues of things. And it's funny, I was thinking of a time, and I thought of this recently, that I sometimes laugh at the different rules that we have in place for kids. Now, because of what I grew up in, it was normal for me to be sent to the store to go buy milk, and I was like maybe 5, so I was maybe grade 1 or something like that. So it was normal for me to go off by myself as a 5-year-old kid and go to the store and get milk for my mom and then come back, and that was a normal thing. And so by the time, and my mom was a single mom, so there were things that my brother and I would do. Like my brother, he was 4 years younger than me, so he was a little bit older. So I was probably maybe 8 or 9 by this time, but he had tried baking a cake, and it was just a box mix, but he didn't know how to read the instructions. He just had watched my mom do it, and he took this cake mix and he dumped it in a bowl and he threw some water in, mixed it up, put it in a pan, no like greasing it or anything else like that, and then threw it in the oven and baked it, and it actually turned out really good. Now me, I was resourceful. I remember my mom sleeping on the couch, and she worked shift work, and so she was probably taking a nap to go in for midnights, and so we hadn't had dinner yet, and she was still sleeping. So I thought, well, I'll help out, and I will make my brother and I some hamburgers. And so we had some ground beef there, and I didn't know how to mix up a patty, so I just kind of took the ground beef and I took a rolling pin, I rolled it out, and I took a mayonnaise jar lid and I cut out like as if I was making cookies, and I fried up some hamburgers, and that was what my brother and I had for dinner that night. So these were things that I just did as and through observation. So a lot of times kids will learn so much more out of just observing. The power of observation is so important, and it's important even when you get into your adulthood. People will learn so much faster by being just in proximity. There's other things that are not explicitly taught that are picked up on, especially if you have somebody like myself, where I am very vigilant at being able to watch all these different things. And so the power of being able to shadow somebody is really, really, really important. And so when you're going through that kind of stuff, now as kids, my brother and I had quite the imagination, and we would tap into that and try to find creative ways to solve problems, because we didn't actually have somebody telling us exactly how to do it, right? And so being able to tap into that creativity, even if it was for a survival skill, was actually pretty important. So, but how do you teach that to people when it's not something that is a survival requirement? It's more just giving them the permission to make mistakes. That is something that I've always tried to do when I'm teaching or training people, especially in a corporate environment, where I will show them, here's how we do it. But I would always tell people I'm open to suggestions once you're able to get that done this way. And so they would, or even if they had feedback real time as they were going through stuff, I would either explain, well, hey, that's a great idea, but this is why we follow it in this way. And I would explain that to them so that they would have a better understanding. And it made sense to them. I always tried to give them some sort of context of whatever rules that we had in place, which helped validate and justify and make sense of the rules that were there. And if they got challenged, it was always something that was really powerful to be able to allow them to challenge the rules that are in place, because sometimes they would question rules and it'd be like, I don't know, this is how we did it. What were you thinking? And then they would say, well, have you tried this? And it's like, well, no, hey, let's update the SOP. That's a great suggestion. And that was a better way. And then there were times too that they would come up with certain things. It's like, I can see why you would think that, but we have to do it this particular way because they weren't aware of some other factors that I would have to explain for the process. It's like, yes, it would be faster for us. However, for this other department, there are some things that they don't have access to. So us taking these extra steps actually allows them to be able to perform the task much faster. So it's easier for us to be able to do this. So showing them that kind of stuff was really, really valuable, and giving them some sort of context as to why that's in there, rather than leaving things up to their imagination. Because when, and this kind of brings me back to, as a kid watching scary movies, I remember one of the things that my mom used to share with me and tell me, because I used to get scared and then I'd cover my eyes and I didn't want to see. And she was like, no, watch what's actually on the screen, because your imagination will make it even worse. And I was like, you are right, because the times that I tried to avoid looking at the realities that were actually in front of me, it wasn't as bad, but my imagination can make it 10 times worse. It can also make it 10 times better, but we tend not to focus on those things. We tend to go to that worst case scenario, especially if you've been in survival situations, right? excuse me, that is one of the ways for us to be able to keep ourselves safe if we imagine various scenarios of what could go wrong. Now, when you do this, although this is a great and very useful survival skill of being able to say, okay, well, if this goes wrong and that goes wrong and this goes wrong, all those kind of things, you get into a corporate environment and you have that kind of default mindset of programming, and you try to share that with senior management, and they look at it like you're a naysayer, that you don't believe in the project, you don't, it's like, no, I just want to know that we have some sort of plan should this go wrong, and we've got this battle tested. Now, where this actually came in very handy is with the Y2K. We had to put in all kinds of contingency plan. Well, in that particular project, I was a superhero. And I'd be like, okay, well, what about this? And I also not only came up with the problems of what the potential downfalls could be, I was proactive at here's the possible solution. So I wasn't somebody who would just sit and complain about the things that could go wrong. I would be like, okay, hey, here's a potential downfall. Here's a couple of things that we could put in place. Who do we know that can handle this and this and this, right? So being able to have various contingency plans in place that could, for in the event something could go wrong. Now, when you're dealing with complex systems, that could be something that really ends up slowing you down quite a bit, and you don't want to do that too many times because you could get stuck in that analysis paralysis kind of thing. So you have to be able to gauge likelihood in there as well. So it's like, oh, you know, when I'm imagining worst case scenarios, it's like, oh, did you forget to factor in, well, what happens if Martians land? Right? It's like, oh no, I hadn't thought of that. Maybe I better put in a plan for that. No, you don't want to do that. But that is taking that concept when you find yourself in an overthinking scenario, doing that kind of adds in some humor, right? And it also is good for being able to get rid of like a writer's block or a creative block, or you're not quite sure where to start with something. Putting down ridiculous ideas, right? So maybe if you're trying to come up with some extra money for something, you're a little bit tight on cash, and it's like, well, you know, you're not sure what it is that you can do. Well, you know, this is a brainstorming technique that you want to write down things like, well, I could rob a bank. I wouldn't recommend that, but you could do that. You could beat up somebody on the street and take their money as if it was like Grand Theft Auto or something like that. Give me them ducats. You could do something silly like that, right? No, I'm not recommending doing that in real life. I am recommending writing those ideas down, because what that does is that allows your mind to imagine possible solutions that you would normally censor because you're too busy trying to block it. So no different than when you're trying to write a certain paper, or say you're trying to write a procedure or process. I hated doing SOPs, and I always got stuck doing them because why? I made the mistake of being good at them. So your punishment for being good at stuff is you get way more work put on you. Now, that can be looked at as a punishment, but it can also be looked at as something that's really, really rewarding, because that gives you additional challenges. Now, if you don't like challenges, that could be a problem for you, and you kind of, the smarter people actually feign incompetence, and I've just never really been good at that. So that is a weak point that I'm working on. So, being able to come up with various ideas to solve challenges is something that is good when you practice the art of imagination. And art therapy is one of the things that is really, really helpful. It's been helpful in the healing process. It's been helpful in the creative process as well, of being able to look at things from a different perspective, and learning to prioritize how you want a particular picture to unfold. And I'm not like the best artist. I am doing better than I thought. I don't instantly hate most of the stuff that I do now, whereas before I used to hate that because I didn't understand that it was a process and it was something that it's a learned skill, and through repetition and practice you can become better at it. So learning to take those actions and move forward in that progression, and being able to assess afterwards whether or not was I on the right track, and having that critical eye is something that is of value as long as it doesn't get out of control, that you're evaluating the result, not the value of the person, right? So don't evaluating the result, not the value of the person, right? So don't try not to take it down the line of that, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm terrible, I can never do this. Any of those self-defeating dialogues. Pay attention to when your inner critic is not constructive criticism, that it's destructive and it's belittling. And so keep a watchful eye out for those kind of things, because those can start triggering those feelings of, and it's belittling. And so keep a watchful eye out for those kind of things, because those can start triggering those feelings of as a person, especially if they struggled with it or they were having challenges, and that you were able to provide them that feedback to show them, hey, you know what, you were actually right on track. All you just need to do is this little tweak here and you're like perfect, 100%. Or if they were way off the track, it's like, oh, you know what, maybe I must have explained things incorrectly, or maybe like that's where I take ownership on my part when I'm doing training with people, of helping them understand. It's like, oh, you know what, help me understand why you took this route when I was thinking that it would go this way, and allowing them to explain so that you could understand without being punitive to them. And it's like, oh, okay, you know what? I hadn't even thought of that being a possibility. And they usually would explain, well, in their old job, they did it this way because of these factors, right? And it's like, oh, okay, I see. And you know what? I never even occurred to me to be able to explain that we need it done in this particular way because of these reasons. And now they have a different context to look at it. This is where, you know, if you aren't taking the time to imagine what their experience is, then you can't possibly solve it. So this is where now you have to rely on communication to be able to get clarity and help understand and help guide people through the correct process. So, yeah, looks like Facebook went down. Oh no. Thankfully, I have the recordings on TikTok. So, guys, for those that are looking for the recordings and you've jumped on late, you weren't able to watch all the way through, I will be uploading the recording to my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B 125. You can go ahead and check it out there. And I'll leave you with this one last story of imaginings. And this was one of the bad ones, but I used to hang out with some of the guys from Midnight Shift, and when they got into their extracurricular activities of herbal remedies, they would start asking strange questions, and I used to, because I didn't partake, but I like to have fun with them, and I would ask them like questions. It's like, what would a chair look like if your knees bent the other way? and they'd be like, whoa, it just messed them up. And then they'd come up with all kinds of crazy ideas. And these are the things that are really powerful of, you know, when you're trying to imagine certain things or you're trying to solve problems within the business, try, if especially it's been something that's challenging, and I've done this on a few different change management teams, of where, you know, we would go from like the absurd, ridiculous kind of, and this is similar to the brainstorming, but we would come up with all these different crazy ideas, and then sometimes that would just get people laughing because they'd imagine somebody, it's like, okay, the new dress code is now pink polka dots, and the guys have to wear a full length skirt, and they have to be able to make sure, like, they kind of made fun of the summer dress code and all of that kind of stuff, and it was just hilarious, right? So it just, allowing yourselves to have fun, especially when you're creating policies and you're trying to come up with creative ways and try to think of the things that could potentially go wrong, and being able to put in contingency plans or various projects to be able to solve those things. So having fun, and you can do this in your personal life as well, is be able to be creative, have that imagination on how you could possibly solve things. And it's like, okay, if you're having like a really frustrating day, it's like just sitting there and imagine a full-grown adult in the middle of the office, and you're feeling really frustrated with the job, but you're like, okay, I'm going to imagine this, and imagine yourself just throwing yourself on the floor, kicking and screaming like a 3-year-old, and watching the expressions of everybody else going, what the hell is going on? And just the thought of that kind of stuff can shift me into a happier state where I'm laughing instead of being angry at the situation, because it's absurd, it's ridiculous, and it just kind of helps put some of those challenges that you are facing into a different perspective that allows you to let go of some of those angry feelings. And if those angry feelings don't get dealt with, a lot of times we turn them in on ourselves, that this job is terrible, I can't do this, da 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 da, and all this negative stuff starts happening. But if you allow yourself to be silly and have fun with it and imagine silly options or scenarios, that can really relieve a lot of the tension, relieve a lot of the pressure that you may be feeling, and allows you to maybe think of a solution that you hadn't thought of before. So guys, with that, I'm going to wrap up tonight. I hope you found this helpful. I would recommend going to check out my YouTube channel, Coach Tina B 125. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you can get notified when I upload a new video. Okay? So hope you guys have a great night, and we will talk to you again soon. Bye.